So how about if we try a do while? So we're going to see if we can get a do while to mimic a for loop. We're going to get it to count down from 10, exactly what we did before. So I'm going to create the int count variable. Let's set it to 10. And then the do while starts with the do and the opening curly brace. And then Visual Studio is nice enough to give me the closing curly brace. Instead of putting a comment on this, I'm going to put the while with the condition. And this is going to be the only time that that semicolon immediately follows the name of the looping structure, like a while. And then we're going to say, let's come in here and put, we're going to see out, or we're going to print count. Let's just see what it is. And then we'll force a new line after that so that we can put each one of them on a new line. And then I am going to take count, and I am going to decrement count because we're counting down from 10. And then the condition on the while loop is going to be while count is greater than or equal to 0, right? That was the way it initially was. So let's run it and see what this does. So we still have it running inside of here. I'm just going to put a 0 and we're going to let it run. And now it's counting down from 10 to 0, exactly like a for loop would do. So let's see if we can get it to mimic a while loop, or we can use it just like we do a while loop, except it's always going to run at least once. So we're going to use it to calculate the future value of a monthly deposit. And generally, because this is something I might want to see the first time around, so what we're going to do is we're going to reset our counter variable to 0. Then we're going to declare an int variable called months because we're going to be prompting the user for months. And I might set months equal to 0. And then I need a future value, right? So let's create we'll make it a double. We'll call the variable future value. If I don't initialize it to anything, Visual Studio is going to put the little dots underneath it saying that it hasn't been initialized. So I guess I could initialize this one to 0.0 since it is, after all, a floating point number. All right, the next thing that I'm going to do is we are going to prompt for the number of months. So I'm going to ask him to enter the number of months to calculate. And then we are going to read in the answer with a CN, and we've decided to put that in the variable called months. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to drop into a do while loop. And so I'm going to put my opening curly brace, I'm going to come down to my closing curly brace and immediately put the while and the colon. I'm going to leave that condition empty for just a moment while I try to figure out what I want this to do. Well, if we're going to be calculating the future value, I need to know what that formula is to be able to do that. So I'm going to do a handy dandy Google search to figure out how to calculate future value. And we're going to see that this is actually going to be the future value plus the monthly payment. So some kind of a monthly deposit. If we had a monthly deposit of some kind, we're going to multiply that by 1 plus the interest rate. So this is how we would calculate it for one single month. The future value, I'm going to add to it whatever my monthly payment is or my monthly deposit. I'm going to multiply that by 1 plus the interest rate. And this is going to give me my future value. All right, so we have the variable called future value. We're going to hard code some of these. So we'll set this equal to future value. Let's say, for instance, that we're going to deposit in our bank account every month. Let's just do $50. And then I'm going to multiply that by 1 plus, let's say, an interest rate. What would be a good interest rate? 5%? So that would be 5%. 0.05 would be 5%. Or we could do 0.025, which would be 2.5%. And then we always need to change the condition. If you'll notice when we did our previous do while, line 101 was a change of the condition. So we always have to change the condition when we're using while loops and do whiles. So the change of the condition here is going to be, we're going to increment our counter variable. So our counter variable starts at 0. We're going to increment it, which means now I know what my condition is, because I'm going to prompt the user, how many months do you want to do this? And so as long as my counter variable, I'm going to continue to loop as long as my counter variable is less than the number of months. So I'm going to continue this as long as my count variable is less than the number of months. And then we are going to see out, let's put a header on it, like future value all right. Oh, we got to get my spelling correct. There we go. And I am going to, let's see if we can, between all these runs of our do while, let's see if we can see out a couple of new lines, just to kind of force some space between these runs of the program. And then let's run it and see what happens. So here are my previous runs. There we go. Enter the number of months to calculate. So if I put 1 month, I'm going to deposit $50 at 2.5% interest. How much would I have at the end of the first month? Well, 2.5% of 50 added to my $50. We're going to break out my calculator and we're going to see what 2.5%, okay, that's not 2.5, 0.025% of $50 is $1.25. So at the end of the first month, I would expect to have $51.25. And there it is right there, $51.25. Let's run it again. And let's try something a little bit different. This is where my test cases come in handy. All right, so now if I do 2 months, now I'm going to have $100, $51.25. And what is, we're going to take our $51.25 at the end of our first month. Then we're going to add $50 to that. I need to know what 20 or 0.25% of this, or 2.5% of this is, times 0.025. That's $2.53. So can I do that math? 101.25 plus 253. So I'm going to add 101.25 plus 101.25. I should have roughly $103.78 roughly. So let's see what happens here. Oh, we have $103.78. All right, so we're taxing my math. So I'm going to run it one more time with just a much, much larger value. How about if we run it for 60 months? Is that 5 years? So if I were to say I'm going to deposit $50 a month for 60 months, how much money would you expect me to have? There it is, $6,969 right here. So we're going to do one more do while. This time what we're going to do is we're going to prompt for 2 numbers, and then we're going to divide, or we're going to display what the quotient of those 2 numbers are, and we're also going to display the remainder. So let me write a little bit of pseudocode. So it seems like the first thing we might need are some variables. The variables I might need is the numerator and the denominator, or the dividend and the divisor. So we need the numerator. We'll call this, we'll make these long. Numerator and denominator. We're going to need those 2. And then, because we're going to see if they want to do it over and over and over again, I'm going to create a char variable and I'm going to call it again. So we're not going to initialize either any of these 3, and I can tell that my Visual Studio is not terribly happy about this. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to prompt for the numerator and the denominator. And then, of course, if we're going to prompt, we should probably capture the input. That would be a really great thing to do, because these are not rhetorical questions, right? And then we are going to print the quotient which is the numerator divided by the denominator, and then we will print the remainder. And then we're going to change the condition, which we're going to ask them. Changing the condition for this part is going to be do it again. We're going to ask them if they want to do it again, which means that if we're going to be repeating all of this, this should probably be inside of a loop. So the loop that we're going to be using to do this is going to be a do while. So let's come back in here and start filling in some things. This is going to be a do loop, so I need the opening curly brace. I'm going to have to drop all the way down here after my pseudocode, and we'll put in the closing curly brace. And this time we're automatically going to finish it with the while because this is a do while. I'm going to leave that condition for just a minute until I get a better understanding of what that condition should be. All right, so we're going to prompt for the numerator and the denominator. We'll do that with a cout, and I might say something like enter the numerator and the denominator. And then to capture the input, we're going to cin, and we're going to cin first the numerator, and then we are going to cin the denominator. Make sure I get all of those spelled correctly. There we go. The reason why it tabbed in my cin, does anybody want to tell me why it tabbed in my cin? If you said it's because I'm missing my semicolon at the end of cout, then you're absolutely right. So then we're going to print the quotient. So I'm going to cout, and we will say, I'll put a header that says something like quotient, if I can spell that right. And the quotient to this should just be the numerator divided by the denominator, right? That should be the quotient. And then if I'm going to print the remainder, I will just cout. We'll tell them that it is the remainder. And then, does anybody remember how to calculate the remainder? Pause the video. If you don't remember how to calculate the remainder, numerator, and then we're going to use the modulus operator, which is the percent sign. And the one thing that I'm going to add is here after my quotient, I am going to force an end line after that. So I'll cout an end line, get rid of my comma because I would like those two to be on a separate line. I'll even do an end line here as well. And then the condition says do it again, change the condition, do it again. So I'm going to cout the statement that says do it again, and that is a question mark. So I'm going to tell the user what the expected input is. I'm going to say yes/no because this is what I'm hoping that they will enter, yes or no. I'm going to cin that answer. I'm going to put it in again, and now I know what my condition is going to be. Do you want to do it again, yes or no? So the condition on this one is going to be while again is equal, or is, we could say is equal to, and this is a string, so I'm going to put in strings yes. While again is equal to yes. If you want to make them type in yes to do it again, I can type in yes, or I could say not equal to no. So how about if we go is equal to yes? And as a matter of fact, now that I think about it, I can see that it is unhappy here. That's because I declared a char as a, again as a char. So instead of yes and no, I should be prompting them for y or n because again is a char, which means that this needs to be a char. So I'll say while again is yes. While again is equal to yes, it's going to repeat it, which means that it's going to require them to say yes to do it again. All right, so let's run it and see what we get. So we have quite a few programs or quite a few loops that are running before this. There we go. This is the number of months. So if I put in 13 months, it's going to give me my future value. Looks like I should have forced a couple of new lines between that run and this run. Enter a numerator and a denominator. I'm going to put some known quantities. If my numerator is 9 and my denominator is 3, we expect the quotient to be 3 with a remainder of 0. There it is. So let's do it again. Yes. This time, if I put in a numerator of 5, and instead of the enter key, I'm just going to space it and put in 2. How many times does 2 go into 5? My quotient is 2 with a remainder of 1. This is doing integer division. Do it again. Yes. Now I can put in some very large numbers. Now we were doing long numbers, so I can put in a much longer number here, enter the key, and we'll put in a denominator, and it's doing integer division for me, a quotient of 98 with a remainder of 115. Do it again. If I key in the answer no, then it's going to drop out of the loop. So now that we've learned about the looping structures, the for loop, the while loop, and the do while loop, the next thing that we're going to do is how can I use these two specific looping structures, the while and the do while, to force valid input.